I caught her before she hit the ground. That's the first thing I need you to understand, not because it's dramatic, though it was, but because in that moment, with my twin sister collapsing against my front door at 2 a.m, the only thought in my head was, I should have seen this coming. She didn't knock. She never had to. We'd had keys to each other's apartments since the day we both moved out of our parents' house in Denton, and I'd heard the lock turning in my sleep the way a mother hears her baby cry, some bone-deep recognition that bypasses your brain entirely. By the time I got to the hallway, she was already sliding down the door frame. I caught her. Her name is Cora. My sister. My twin. 18 minutes older than me, a fact she has held over my head since approximately age 4. We don't look exactly alike. She got our father's jaw and I got our mother's eyes. But we sound the same on the phone, finish each other's sentences, and once convinced an entire college lecture hall that we were the same person taking a makeup exam. We are, in the way that only twins understand, two halves of something that was supposed to be one. I brought her inside and sat her on the couch and turned on the lamp, and that's when I saw it. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut. There was a cut above her cheekbone that had dried into a dark rust-colored line. She was holding her left arm against her ribs like it hurt to breathe, and she was wearing what I recognized as her Tuesday clothes, a green cardigan, dark jeans, which told me she hadn't gone home to change before coming here. I sat down next to her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at her face for a long moment and said, very quietly, "Who did this?" It wasn't a question. We both knew the answer. His name was Fletcher. She'd been married to him for 2 years and 8 months, and I had spent approximately 2 years and 6 months watching something about her slowly, quietly go wrong. I want to be honest about something. I didn't like Fletcher from the beginning, and for a long time I told myself that was my problem. He was handsome in a country club way, good at conversation, always the first to offer to pay for dinner. He had a firm handshake and a job in commercial real estate and a truck he kept immaculately clean. Cora met him at a friend's wedding, and she called me that same night, whispering so her roommate wouldn't hear, and said, "I think I just met the person I'm going to marry." I was happy for her. I was. But there was something about the way Fletcher looked at people, including me, including her, that made me feel like he was always calculating, like every conversation was a negotiation he intended to win. I noticed, early on, the way he'd correct her in public. Small things. The way she told a story, the restaurant she'd suggested, the fact that she'd ordered a glass of wine before checking whether he was in the mood to drink. Cora laughed it off. She said I was overprotective. She said, "That's just how he is. He's a details person." And I let it go because I wasn't sure if I was seeing something real or seeing what I'd always feared for her, someone who would make her smaller. By the time I was sure, they were already married. I asked her, sitting on my couch at 2 a.m. with dry blood on her face, how long. She looked at her hands. "Cora." "It started about a year in," she said. Her voice was flat in a way that scared me more than crying would have. "Not like this at first. He grabbed my arm too hard, shoved me against the counter if he was angry about something. Then he started." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "It got worse after we moved to Harwick." Harwick was the small town 2 hours east where Fletcher had grown up. His family had been there for 3 generations. His father sat on the city council. His uncle owned the largest employer in the county, a lumber processing plant where half the men in town worked. When Fletcher said he wanted to move back to be closer to his family, Cora had agreed because she thought it was a good thing. A man who valued family. A man who valued family. What it actually meant was that she was 2 hours away from everyone who loved her, in a town where the Harwick name opened doors and closed mouths. "Why didn't you call me?" I said. She finally looked at me. "Because I knew what you'd do." "What would I do?" "You'd go over there." I didn't say anything. "And then it would be worse," she said. He has people there. His cousin is a deputy. His father plays golf with the sheriff every Saturday. I tried to talk to someone, a neighbor, and the next day Fletcher knew exactly what I'd said, word for word. I had nowhere to go. I sat with that for a minute. The particular horror of it, not just the violence, but the architecture built around it. The way he'd moved her somewhere she'd be alone, surrounded her with his people, made sure there was no door she could open that he didn't already own the key to. "What happened tonight?" I said. She told me. It had started over dinner. Something she'd said wrong. Something she'd done wrong. She couldn't always track the specific trigger anymore because the triggers kept shifting. He'd hit her twice in the kitchen and then again in the hallway. When she fell, he'd told her to get up and stop being dramatic. She'd waited until she heard him turn the TV back on, and then she'd taken her keys and driven the 2 hours to my apartment without stopping once. "I can't go back," she said. "You're not going back," I said. "Vera." Her voice broke for the first time. "You don't understand. If I leave, he'll know where to find me. He knows I'd come here. He has money. He has a lawyer already. His family will. Cora." I took her hands. "Look at me." She did. "You are not going back. I don't know what comes next, but that part is decided. Okay?" She nodded, and then she started to cry, and I held her for a long time without saying anything at all. I should tell you something about myself, because it matters for the rest of this story. I spent 4 years in the United States Army. Military police, then criminal investigation. I left the service 2 years before this night because my mother got sick and someone needed to come home, and I was always better at taking care of people than my sister gave herself credit for doing. After I got out, I took a job as an investigator for a private firm that worked insurance fraud and domestic cases. I was not, in other words, the kind of person who needed to figure out what to do next. I knew exactly what to do next. The next morning, after Cora had slept, after I'd photographed her injuries and written down everything she'd told me in as much detail as I could, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to a domestic violence attorney named Miss Wachowski, who came highly recommended and who, when I explained the situation, said she could see Cora that afternoon. The second was to my supervisor at work, to let her know I needed personal time. The third was to my mother, who cried for about 30 seconds and then said, "What do you need me to do?" which is the most my mother thing she has ever said. Then I made Cora coffee and sat across from her at my kitchen table and said, "I need to go get your things." She looked up. "What? Your documents? Passport, social security card, birth certificate, financial records, your grandmother's ring." I'd watched her take that ring off when she married Fletcher because he'd said it was too old-fashioned. She kept it in the back of her jewelry drawer. "Anything else that matters. I need to go to the house while he's at work. He'll know. He won't know until it's too late, and by then Ms. Wachowski will have filed." Cora was quiet for a moment. "What if he comes home early?" I looked at her steadily. "Then he'll find someone who's been trained to handle people exactly like him." She almost smiled. It was the first one I'd seen. I drove to Harwick on a Wednesday, which was when I knew Fletcher had back-to-back client meetings scheduled across town. Cora had access to his calendar, and she checked it for me before I left. I'd been to their house a handful of times, so I knew the layout. I knew where Cora said she kept her documents. I had her key. It should have been simple. In and out in 20 minutes. I was in the hallway, grandmother's ring in my pocket, documents in the bag over my shoulder, when I heard the front door open. I didn't panic. Panic is a luxury. I stood very still and listened, and I heard Fletcher's voice before I saw him. He was on his phone, irritated, saying something about a deal that had fallen through. He came down the hallway and stopped dead when he saw me standing in the doorway to the bedroom. I watched his face go through several things at once. Surprise. Confusion. Then, very quickly, anger. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" he said. He'd ended his phone call. He was bigger than I remembered. Or maybe I'd always registered it and stored it away. 6'1". Broad through the shoulders, the kind of man who'd played high school football and never quite let go of the identity. Picking up Cora's things, I said. Where is she? Not a question. A demand. Somewhere safe. Something shifted in his face. You need to put that bag down and get out of my house before I call the police. Call them, I said. In fact, I'd encourage it. He didn't call them. People who have things to hide rarely do when you offer. You don't know what you're talking about, he said. He took a step toward me. She has problems. She gets emotional. She overreacts to things. I photographed her injuries, I said. I have her medical records from the last 18 months. She documented 3 separate ER visits listed as falls and accidents. I have a written statement she gave to me. I have the name of your neighbor who Cora spoke to, who I'd like to speak to myself. I watched him. I spent the last 2 days building the kind of record that doesn't go away, Fletcher. Ms. Wachowski filed this morning. He went very still. This is what's going to happen, I said. And my voice was the same voice I'd used in CID interviews, even, unhurried, letting the words do the work. You're going to let me walk out of here. You're going to cooperate with the legal process. You are not going to contact Cora, come near her apartment, or use your family's connections to interfere with these proceedings, and you are never, not once, not for any reason, going to touch her again. And if I don't, he said, very quietly, then the records I've built will go to the district attorney, to the local newspaper, to your father's friends on the city council, and to your uncle who employs half of Harwick. I paused. I was an army investigator for 4 years, Fletcher. I know how to build a case, and I know how to make sure the right people see it. He stared at me for a long time. Get out of my house, he said finally. His voice had changed. Something had gone out of it. Gladly, I said. And I walked past him to the front door, and he didn't touch me, and I didn't stop moving until I was in my car with the doors locked and the engine running. Only then did I let my hands shake for about 30 seconds. Then I put the car in drive and headed back to my sister. I want to be careful here, because this is the part where people expect a certain kind of story. The kind where one big confrontation fixes everything, where the villain collapses and the credits roll. That's not what happened. What happened was messier and slower and harder. Fletcher did not simply fold. His family hired an attorney who filed counter motions. There were weeks of back and forth, hearings Cora had to sit through across a table from him. Paperwork that seemed designed specifically to be exhausting. His father made phone calls. His cousin, the deputy, did in fact attempt to insert himself in ways that Ms. Wachowski handled with a precision I found genuinely impressive. Through all of it, Cora stayed at my apartment. She slept in my second bedroom and ate breakfast at my kitchen table and slowly started to look more like herself. She got a part-time job at a bookstore 3 miles from my apartment. She started calling our mother every Sunday again. There was one moment, about 6 weeks in, when she got a voicemail from Fletcher. He'd gotten around the no-contact order through a third party, a mutual acquaintance who clearly didn't know the full picture. The voicemail was measured, reasonable sounding, the voice of a man who knew someone might listen to it. He said he missed her. He said he just wanted to talk. He said he thought they could work things out if she would give him a chance. Cora played it once. She sat at the kitchen table with her phone face up between her hands, and she listened to his voice fill the room, and when it ended, she looked at me and said, "I need you to help me report this." I felt something shift in my chest. Something that had been waiting. "Yeah," I said. "Let's do that." The mutual acquaintance, it turned out, was willing to cooperate with Ms. Wachowski once she understood what she'd been used for. That voicemail, plus the violation of the protective order it represented, was the thing that finally tipped the balance. Fletcher agreed to the divorce terms Ms. Wachowski had been pushing for. He agreed to the financial settlement. He agreed to everything, and he did it through his attorney without ever looking Cora in the face again. The morning after the divorce was finalized, Cora came into my kitchen while I was making coffee and sat down and didn't say anything for a while. "What are you thinking?" I said. She thought about it. I'm thinking I don't know who I am when I'm not afraid. I poured her a cup and set it in front of her. You're about to find out. She turned the cup in her hands. I keep waiting to feel relieved, like the way you feel when you put down something heavy. I thought I'd feel that, but it's more like. She stopped. Do you know what it's like to be in a loud room for so long that when it gets quiet, you don't know what to do with the quiet? I sat down across from her. Yeah, I said, I do. She looked at me. I'd told her a little about my last deployment, about the adjustment of coming home, the strange hollowness of ordinary days after extraordinary pressure. Not everything, but enough. It gets better, I said. The quiet starts to feel like yours. She nodded slowly. She drank her coffee. After a while, she said, I'm going to get my own place. I know. Not far. I know that too. She smiled a little. You're insufferable. 18 minutes, I said. That doesn't count. It absolutely counts. She moved into an apartment 4 blocks from mine in March. I helped her carry boxes up 2 flights of stairs in the cold, and she complained the entire time, and I told her she had too many books for a woman who claimed to be starting over light. And she said books don't count as things, they count as necessities. And I said I was pretty sure that was not what the word necessity meant, and we argued about it cheerfully the whole way up. The last box contained, among other things, our grandmother's ring. Cora set it on the kitchen windowsill, where the afternoon light would hit it. I'm going to wear it again, she said. Good. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at me. I never thanked you for going to the house, for all of it. I know I was angry at first. You weren't angry? I was scared. Same thing, sometimes. She wrapped her arms around me and I hugged her back. And we stood in her empty new apartment in the cold afternoon light, and I thought about the night she fell through my door and how frightened I'd been underneath all the steadiness, how carefully I'd kept that fear away from her because she needed someone to be the floor, not the ceiling. The fear had been worth holding. The steadiness had been worth the effort. She was okay. She was going to be okay. That was the whole point. I've thought a lot, in the time since, about what would have happened if Cora hadn't come to me that night. If she'd gone somewhere else, or nowhere at all. If she'd stayed. The statistics on domestic violence are not abstract to me anymore. They weren't really abstract before, given my work, but they're different when it's someone you held when you were 3 days old. 1 in 4 women in this country will experience severe intimate partner violence. The average victim leaves and returns 7 times before leaving for good. Most don't leave at all. What made the difference for Cora wasn't that I went to the house. It wasn't the confrontation, as satisfying as some part of me found it. It was that she had somewhere to go, that she knew I would believe her. That she had someone who would sit across a table from her and say, tell me everything, and mean it, and not flinch, and not leave. That's the thing I want anyone listening to take away from this. If you are someone's person, the one they'd call at 2 in the morning, answer the call. Don't make them convince you. Don't make them feel like a burden. Just open the door. And if you are the one who needs the door opened, it is not your fault. It has never been your fault. The person who built the walls around you was counting on you to believe you deserved them. You don't. You never did. Cora sent me a photo last week. She started hiking. Something she always wanted to do, but Fletcher said was pointless. And she was standing at the top of a ridge somewhere in the Blue Ridge Mountains, wearing a bright orange jacket, laughing at something off camera. I saved it as my phone wallpaper. She looks exactly like herself. Like the person she was always going to be on the other side of something terrible. I look at it some mornings when the world feels heavy and I think, that's what it's for. All the steadiness, all the held breath, all the careful, deliberate work of holding someone up long enough for them to find their feet. That's what it's for. I've been asked more than once since this happened, whether I regret going to that house, Whether I think I made things worse by confronting him directly. Whether I should have just let the lawyers handle it from the start and stayed out of it. I've thought about that honestly. I don't have a clean answer. What I know is this: the choices Fletcher made over 2.5 years didn't happen in a vacuum. He chose, repeatedly and deliberately, to use his size and his family name and the geography of that small town as weapons against someone who trusted him. Every time he raised his hand, every time he moved the goalposts on what would set him off, every time he made Cora feel like she was the problem, that was a choice. A series of choices, compounding. And what I've come to understand is that the consequences that followed were not punishment handed down by anyone. They were simply the natural weight of those choices, finally landing where they belonged. He built a life on the assumption that no one would ever make him account for what he did behind closed doors. That assumption was wrong. That's not fate. That's not the universe evening the score. That's just what happens when someone finally has the documentation, the attorney, and the willingness to stand in the hallway and say, "I see exactly what you are." Cora spent years believing she was the problem. That's the thing about that kind of relationship. It doesn't just hurt you physically. It rewrites the way you understand yourself. She started believing his version of her. Too emotional, too sensitive, overreacting. That rewriting is, to me, the cruelest part. Because a bruise heals. But believing you deserved it, that takes so much longer. The work she did after she left, the slow, unglamorous work of remembering who she was before him, that took more courage than anything I did. I drove to a house. I had a conversation. I knew how to handle myself. What Cora did was harder. She had to rebuild her own judgment from the ground up. She had to learn to trust her own perception of events again. She had to sit across a table from him in a hearing room and not disappear. That's not a small thing. That is an enormous thing. And she did it without any of my training and with a lot more to lose. What I take from all of it is something I try to carry into everyday since. Intelligence without courage is just analysis. You can understand a situation perfectly and still do nothing. You can know exactly what's right and still talk yourself out of acting on it. The thing that makes knowledge useful, the thing that makes it matter, is the willingness to act on it when it costs you something. It cost me some sleep, some personal time. A very unpleasant 10 minutes in a hallway in Harwick. It cost Cora years of her life, and she still found a way through. I think about that whenever something feels hard. I think about her in that orange jacket on the ridge, laughing at something I couldn't see. And I think, if she can do what she did, I can do what's in front of me. That's the only lesson I have. Show up for the people who matter. Do the hard thing when you are the one positioned to do it. And trust that the truth, documented carefully and stated clearly, is still one of the most powerful things in the world.